Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show that covers all things marketing. The GSMC Marketing News Podcast gives you the latest marketing news, from what major businesses have planned for the coming year to the newest trends in advertising, from podcasts, digital and streaming, to the old standbys of radio, television, and billboards. Whether you're a marketing agent or a business trying to expand your brand, you've come to the right place. The GSMC Marketing News Podcast starts now.
Hello and welcome to the GSMC Marketing Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mackenzie, and I am so excited for today's episode. As we all know, the Super Bowl is coming up, and this year is planned to be bigger than ever. So many of those famous Super Bowl commercials that we're used to seeing over the years, they're turning 10 years old, and that's a momentous moment for all of us. And so I thought it would be a lot of fun to take a look at the top 20 Super Bowl ads from the past over 20 years for sure. I'm definitely taking a look all the way back to the 1980s for some ad inspiration, but also some that just came out last year. So today's going to be a really exciting episode. We're also just going to talk about Super Bowl advertising, and maybe it's the right choice for your company, maybe it's not, sort of depending on your marketing budget size, but we're going to get into all of that later. For now, let's talk about what is new in the marketing world. So Instagram TV has decided to get rid of the little tiny orange button that sits at the top of your screen. Instagram TV is still totally going to be available. However, so many people were just irritated by the little button in the top of the screen that Instagram decided to get rid of it. So now with that being removed and people not having to deal with the little button in the top corner, you can only watch the content produced on Instagram TV if you go through the person's actual profile or click on the post itself. A Facebook company spokesperson said, "As we've continued to work on making it easier for people to create and discover Instagram TV content, we've learned that most people are finding Instagram TV content through previews in the feed. The Instagram TV channel is Explore creators' profiles and in the standalone app. Very few are actually clicking on the icon in the top right corner of the home screen in the Instagram app. We always aim to keep Instagram as simple as possible, so we're removing this icon based on these learnings and feedback from our community." So very interesting to see how they're planning on moving forward with the app and also with just all the people no longer having to deal with it being in the top right screen. It looks like it is going to remain a feature for now, but I'd be interested to look back at this story in a year to see what Instagram has done with the Instagram TV technology, considering it is definitely not the most popular item on Instagram TV, and it is definitely not the most popular item within social media. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see. Let me know what you think of the Instagram TV icon being removed from the home screen and what you think could be improved about Instagram's current platform. Since it was recently bought by Facebook, I definitely think we are going to be seeing a lot of changes within the platform itself, and it will be interesting to see how it grows and how it develops into a social media platform that is different than we've ever experienced, but hopefully it still has that same level of engagement that we all love about Instagram. I hope they definitely don't lose those elements. So the second story for today is that Mr. Peanut has reportedly actually died. So Mike Pierotonzi, the group creative director at Planters Peanut, said, "We did the unthinkable. We created a program and an idea where Mr. Peanut dies, and dies specifically sacrificing himself for his friends, which has always been a tenet of who he is and what he does. He always puts other first." And then Samantha Hess, who is the Planters brand manager at Kraft Heinz, said, "It is with heavy hearts that we confirm Mr. Peanut has passed away at 104 years old. He will be remembered as the legume who always brought people together for nutty adventures and a good time. We encourage fans to tune in to Mr. Peanut's funeral during the third quarter of the Super Bowl to celebrate his life. So obviously I wanted to talk about the story on today's podcast specifically because this is a marketing ploy for the Super Bowl. They decided to kill off their main mascot because they understood that there's going to be a lot of stuff going on at the Super Bowl halftime show. Mr. Peanut is very old, as we said, 104 years old, and they wanted to generate some buzz about what was going to happen and what people could expect from what they're showing us at the halftime commercial. Because obviously Mr. Peanut, we might talk about a few of his ads later in today's episode. He's always been around during the Super Bowl halftime shows and during the ads. So he's definitely been a staple to that community and that type of marketing, especially for the planters community. So it was very interesting to see them make the decision to kill off Mr. Peanut from their branding. And it'll be interesting to see if they bring on a new mascot, how they honor him at on their Super Bowl ad, and to see what direction their marketing goes in now. It is rumored that Mr. Peanut's death is supposed to be closely related to Tony Stark's death at the end of Endgame. I'm sorry if I just spoiled that movie for anybody, but also it's been out for over a year, so I'm allowed to talk about it now. But it was supposed to resonate similar feelings because they really wanted to get fans outraged on social media. They wanted to have people talk about this because Mr. Peanut definitely hasn't been the subject of conversation in quite a while. So it is very interesting to see how they're using the pop culture trends around them to influence their own marketing. Our third story up today is that Tim Hortons has tapped McDonald's executive for their new chief marketing officer. Hope Bagozzi is the new chief marketing officer for the chief marketing officer for the Tim Hortons coffee and donut chain. This is the latest of several recent management shuffles in the coffee chain. Hope joins after a 15-year career with McDonald's Canada, where she led the national marketing team. Tim Hortons currently has 4,800 locations, mostly in Canada and a few in the U.S. It also has restaurants in Mexico, the UK, Spain, and the Philippines, and also China. So really interesting. I'm Canadian, so I found this story to be interesting, but I'm sure a lot of you out there do as well, because McDonald's and Tim Hortons are major competitors, especially in Canada. So it's interesting to see the fact that, Tim Hortons is having several management changes right now, but that they're actually taking from their competition. To me, this definitely says that they're aware that they need their brand and their marketing to be looked at in a different way than it has in the past. So they're definitely looking to shake things up and modify what they've been doing with some new ideas, and who better to go to than someone who was working with your direct competition. So very interesting, and something that I think is important whenever we're looking at giving our marketing a bit of a shake or a bit of a spin, that we take a look at what the competition is doing. And I'm not saying we steal ideas or we do anything like that, but it's important to take note of what they're doing and be aware of it so that we're always staying on top of things and we're always staying relevant. Okay, everyone, we're going to go ahead and take a short break from the podcast, but when we come back, we're going to start getting into the top 20 Super Bowl ads from the past, I want to say the past 20 years, but guys, I'm reaching way into that vault because I really want to talk about all the ones that are great and meaningful in the marketing world. So stay tuned, because you are listening to the GSMC Marketing Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mackenzie Jaquish, and I'll be right back.
Golden State Media Concepts Technology Podcast covers everything tech. The hottest mobile phones, tablets, games. We review it, rate it, test it. Whether you're Microsoft or Apple, Android or iPhone, we'll give it to you black and white. The Golden State Media Concepts Technology Podcast.
Welcome back to the GSMC Marketing Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mackenzie Jaquich, and thank you so much for joining me on today's episode. Before the break, we were talking about what is new in the marketing world. We talked about Tim Hortons taking McDonald's executive, Hope Bagozzi, to promote her to be their Chief Marketing Officer. We talked about how Mr. Peanut has sadly passed away at the age of 104, and how his death will be used as a marketing tool for Planters Peanuts at the upcoming Super Bowl. We also talked about how Instagram TV will no longer be able to be found on the home screen of the app. However, you will still be able to use the app itself, the standalone Instagram TV app that has 7 million of Instagram's 1 billion users. So, very interesting to see already how the platform is changing under its new leadership. Now that we are back from our break, I just want to quickly give you guys some stats and facts about the Super Bowl commercials and ads that we see every year. Obviously, this is a major part of the Super Bowl. It's definitely the reason I watch it. I know it's a reason a lot of people watch it, but once you start working in the marketing world, you start to understand why they're so important and why it's something that we should take note of. Now, a lot of people, and I'm sure a lot of people listening to this podcast, don't have the financial means to put on a Super Bowl commercial. But that doesn't mean that you should just ignore them and be like, oh, they're out of our budget, they're unrealistic, why would I pay attention to that? Because, and I've talked about this a lot on other podcasts, just because something seems like it's out of our reach doesn't mean that we shouldn't try to take inspiration from that. I think it's really important to always be pushing ourselves, both with our marketing and with our business. So I definitely think the Super Bowl commercials are an important example of that, because you're always going to be paying attention to what these big brands are doing. And during the Super Bowl is when they really pull out the big guns. It's where they do their biggest work. It's where they push themselves. So definitely a very important time to take note of that. So just for anyone who's curious, because maybe you were like, hey, maybe this is in my budget, how much does it cost? A 30-second Super Bowl commercial cost $5 million, or $167,000 per second. So that was recently updated in 2017, but it still holds true for the commercials coming out in 2020. And you'll notice as we go through the list in later today's episode, a lot of the commercials are under 30 seconds, but if you go back to the commercials that are in the 1980s and the 1990s, then they are a little bit longer. They're a full minute, they're a minute 30, some of them are 2 minutes long, and that just wouldn't happen today because of the cost of them. But it doesn't mean that they weren't expensive back then, because they absolutely were. What it does mean, however, is that the price has changed, and also the style of the entertainment has changed, because yes, it costs more money to have a minute-long commercial, but also not a lot of people are willing to put in the time to watch a minute-long commercial. As silly as that sounds, I think our generation and the current climate that we're in, people only want to watch commercials if they're under 30 seconds. YouTube commercials are a really great example of this. Basically, everything needs to happen within those first 5 seconds, or people will skip the ad. So definitely a great example if you watch a Super Bowl commercial, to be able to find out, okay, what are the important parts of this ad? What are we really trying to get across? And how can we get it across in only 30 seconds? So just for those of you that are like, well, does anyone really watch cable anymore? Are commercials as important? Over 200% more people live streamed the Super Bowl from 2015 to 2016. So, and that broke the live streaming record with 3.96 million unique viewers turning in. So that is a crazy amount of people tuning in and live streaming the Super Bowl as opposed to watching it on cable TV. But the thing is that they are still getting the commercials, they're still getting the ads, so that's still worth a lot of money, obviously, and it's definitely not something that is going out of style anytime soon. The top Super Bowl ad gets 100 to 150 million views online. And that is during the actual game, but also it is later. Again, as I was going through these commercials, I found myself sort of just wandering off in my own mind of, oh, I do remember that commercial. Oh, what about this one? Let me look it up. So they definitely become something that's a little bit more nostalgic, and we always talk about nostalgia on this podcast because marketing is all about being nostalgic, especially right now. So it's super important that we pay attention to the nostalgia factor, and we understand that a lot of these commercials are going to be trying to pull that out and use it to help people. So when we take a look at the top 20 list, which will be coming up next, I want you all to really pay attention to which ones are putting in enough information within those 30 seconds and which ones are just using nostalgia to fill their 30 seconds. So definitely stay tuned for that. For now, we're going to go ahead and take a little break from the podcast so that we can come back in. We have all of our stats, we have all of our facts, and we can just really dive into rating and talking about these top 20 Super Bowl commercials. So stay tuned because you are listening to the GSMC Marketing Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mackenzie Jaquesh, and I'll be right back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the GSMC Marketing Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mackenzie Jaquesh, and thank you so much for joining me on today's episode. We are going to have so much fun counting down the top 20 Super Bowl commercials, and I thought this was a really great year to do this countdown, not only because I'm hosting this podcast, but also because right now a lot of these ads, and we're going to talk about it, will be turning 10 years old during this year's Super Bowl, and there's rumors that they're going to be revived and they're going to be talked about, and that we're going to get to see some really great new commercials coming out of those brands. And the reason I want to do a countdown at all for the Super Bowl is because I think it's really important for us as marketers that although maybe we don't have the $5 million that it takes to run a Super Bowl ad, we do have the means to take inspiration from these ads, because these are some of the biggest brands in the world, and they are pulling out their biggest guns, their biggest celebrities, their biggest tricks to try to get people's attention for 30 seconds. And that is such an amazing thing to do in marketing that how can we not stop and take notice of it and try to take some of that inspiration and use it within our own marketing. So that's really what I want you to think about today as we go through our countdown of how can I take, what Pepsi did, what HBO did, what Amazon did, and use the inspiration from that and the level of commitment with that in my own marketing. And if you do end up taking inspiration from any of these ads, please tweet me or send me an image over Instagram. The GSMC Marketing Podcast has an Instagram, a Twitter, a Facebook, a YouTube channel. We have everything, and I would love it if we could connect more off of this podcast over there. So definitely go check us out if you haven't already. So number 1, Bud Light and HBO's Joust commercial. So this came out in 2019. So it is definitely one of our more recent Super Bowl ads. And it is basically Bud Light set in a medieval time frame. There's a lot of knights. They're going to be jousting. And somehow, no one can believe it, but Bud Light's knight, which also very clever rhyming, Bud Light, good job, gets jousted and dies. But just in the nick of time, the dragon from Game of Thrones comes crashing down to interject itself into Bud Light's commercial for no reason other than to just promote Game of Thrones and to promote HBO, because Game of Thrones was ending. They didn't need any more publicity, but HBO always does. And Game of Thrones is definitely HBO's most successful show, I'd be willing to bet. I don't have those numbers in front of me, but I think that's a pretty safe bet. So I just thought this was really a great example of two brands that don't have a lot in common, especially Bud Light and Game of Thrones. We could have paired it up with a different show. They don't have a lot in common, but they do carry a lot of notoriety and a lot of a similar fan base, perhaps. So joining them together was just a very clever way on both Bud Light's and HBO's part, because it really gave them both the experience to reach that audience, but also reach a new audience. So very clever ad. I definitely give this one a 3 out of 5 stars. Only because, although I really like it and it did make the top 20 list, we are going to be talking about some amazing ads. And this one to me didn't really tell much of a story within the 30 seconds. And we never really got an explanation as to why the dragon came down. And storytelling to me is very important, especially when it comes to marketing. The next one is, number 2 is Tides. It's a Tide ad. So this featured, I'm so sorry, this is not the entertainment podcast, so I do not know the actor's name, but it is like the dad from Stranger Things, or he's an uncle. It's an older guy from Stranger Things, and he is running through all these different types of Super Bowl commercials. We got funny ones, we got inspirational ones, we got car ones, we got gadget ones. And every time he's like, do you think this is a car ad? No, it's a Tide ad. Look at how clean these clothes are. Of course it's a Tide ad. So basically he gets to go through every type of ad, but always point out that the clothes are clean, and that's what makes it a Tide ad. So it gets people really to start thinking, is every ad a Tide ad if they're wearing clean clothes? That's the question they ask in the commercial, and I found myself asking it of myself later. I was like, well, that is an interesting point, isn't it, Tide? Obviously, not every ad is actually a Tide ad, but it was an interesting and a funny way to really represent the brand, but also showcase it in a new way. Tide's brand is that they can give you the cleanest clothes, but they didn't do it in their traditional way of marketing that they normally would, which is like bed sheets and pillowcases and people smelling things. No, this was a really funny and comedic way to sort of up the ante with their Super Bowl commercial and show their product in a new way. And I'm giving this one 4 out of 5 stars because they stayed true to their brand, but they were able to mix it up and make it interesting in a new way that a lot of other brands don't seem to do during the Super Bowl. It was a risky move, but I definitely think it paid off. Number 3, Amazon Alexa loses her voice. This commercial also came out in 2018, and right away, let me tell you, it is getting 5 out of 5 stars. They really brought out the big guns. Now, obviously, Amazon has the money to bring out the big guns for a Super Bowl ad, but this was insane what they did. They had every famous person possible all pretending to be Amazon Alexa's voice. When she loses hers, they had this backup. So instead of asking Alexa how to make a grilled cheese sandwich, you asked Gordon Ramsay, and he replied in the same way Gordon Ramsay would. And I just thought it was a super clever way to sort of show an integration into pop culture, make it really funny, make it really light, and make it fun enough that people want to share. This ad really had a shareability, if that's a real word, because people wanted to show it on social media. People thought it was really funny. So I definitely think that just for those reasons alone, it definitely hit the mark on what you want for a Super Bowl commercial, which is you want people to want to look at it after. And it also really, really told a great story it starts with the problem of Amazon Alexa losing her voice, and it ends with her saying, "Don't worry, guys, I got it from here." She has found her voice again, and Rebel Wilson does not have to continue being the voice of Amazon Alexa. Number 4, Always Like a Girl. So this came out in 2015, and Always Infinity asked a bunch of different people over the age of, I believe they were over the age of 10 at least, men and women. They said, how do you run like a girl? How do you throw like a girl? How do you fight like a girl? And everyone, sort of did the funny, traditional things that we're used to seeing. But then they asked only girls under the age of 10 the same question. And they didn't just do the funny thing we're used to seeing. They didn't pretend to run like little schoolgirls or like Nancy girls, whatever you want to say that the stereotype is. They ran really fast, and they fought really hard, and they threw really far. And it was just trying to tell the story of, let's change the narrative about girls. And this ad gets 5 out of 5 stars because it is absolutely telling a story. First of all, it is definitely something you can share after the Super Bowl and people will want to see again. But more importantly, it's using those 30 seconds that they got to tell a story to tell a meaningful story. The Amazon Alexa losing her voice, that didn't really tell a meaningful story. It was just sort of fun and funny, which is good too. But if you have the opportunity to do something real with your marketing, take it and use that, because that is such a huge responsibility to have, but it's an important one to have as well. Number 5, Volkswagen, the Force, that came out in 2011. Now, this apparently is one of the most successful Super Bowl commercials of all time, and I can completely see why. The Force showed a little boy dressed up as Darth Vader trying to use the Force around his home. He tries using it to turn on the TV. He tries using it to turn on his mom's exercise equipment, the vacuum, to bring his lunch to him, and nothing works. And we slowly see, even though he's wearing Darth Vader's helmet, we slowly see him get more and more defeated. He's clearly upset. He's clearly emotional about not really having these powers until his dad gets home. And you see him light up, you see his excitement, he rushes out the door, and you're like, oh, it's because he gets to see his dad, he's so excited. No, it's because he wants to try to use the Force on the dad's new Volkswagen, which is really funny because, again, you see him try, and you see him wait to see if it's going to work, but this time it does. The car starts up, it starts working, and you see his surprise and his joy, and then we see a shot of the parents inside the kitchen, and the dad has hit the automatic start button on the key set that started the car. So I like this commercial for the same reason I like the Tide commercial, is that it's showcasing the brand that, oh, look at how cool these features are, look at how sleek this car is, look at how also family-friendly the car is, but it's showing it in a new way. It's showing it from the perspective of a child rather than the perspective of the adult who is buying the car. And it uses that nostalgia factor, not that the Tide one did, but it does use a nostalgia factor because people who are buying the car like Star Wars. People who have kids who are buying the car like Star Wars. It's just sort of this universal thing that makes people excited. And even if you're not a fan of the movies, you definitely recognize that brand enough to be able to go, oh, I know what that is. So definitely very interesting and definitely a very fun ad. I give it 5 out of 5 stars as well. Okay, everyone, we're going to go ahead and take a short break from the podcast, but when we come back, we're going to get right back into this top 20 list. So stay tuned for that. I'm your host, Mackenzie Jakewish, and you are listening to the GSMC Marketing Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network.
Are you a business owner? Someone interested in the latest news that might affect your business? Then check out the GSMC Business News Podcast, a show dedicated to keeping you up to date on all things concerning business, technology, and the stock market. Get a head start on the day as we keep you updated on the latest goings-on Wall Street, money, jobs, and technology. The GSMC Business News Podcast has you covered.
welcome back to the GSMC Marketing Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Before the break, we were getting into our list of the top 20 Super Bowl commercials of all time. We covered Volkswagen's The Force, Always Like a Girl, Amazon Alexa losing her voice, Tide's It's a Tide ad, and Bud Light and HBO's The Joust. Now that we are back from our break, let's get right back into that list. Number 6, Snickers, Betty White. So this is one of the ads I was talking about earlier in the podcast. It is actually turning 10 years old this year. So in 2010, Snickers introduced the You're Not You When You're Hungry ad, which showed a famous celebrity, the first one being Betty White, playing a sport or doing an activity that is very unusual for Betty White to be doing. In this case, it was tackle football. And all of her friends around her are young guys, and they're like, what are you doing? You're playing like Betty White. You're acting like Betty White. And she's cussing at them, saying, that's not what your girlfriend said. And she's sort of acting like a teenage boy. Then a young girl pulls her aside and says, babe, eat the Snickers. You're not you when you're hungry. She takes a bite out of the Snickers, and the next scene we see is that she has turned into a teenage boy. So it started this whole phenomenon of ads that were focused on showing a celebrity who will be doing an activity that they're definitely not fit to be doing. But once they eat the Snickers, they will turn into the correct person that they actually are, that they're intending to be. So usually it would be something sports related, or sometimes it would show like a grumpy old man turning into a young girl. I definitely relate to that. When I get hungry, I am very grumpy and very irritable. So Snickers have had my back in a lot of ways. But this ad will be turning 10 years old this year, so a lot of people have been speculating that we will see a return of the ad to the Super Bowl commercial. All right, I give this ad 5 out of 5 stars. It definitely was Snickers thinking outside of the box, but then sticking with that theme for years to come now. So I definitely think the commitment to the ad should be appreciated. Number 7, Monster.com kids ad from 1999. I told you guys, we're reaching way into the vault for these. I'm not going to just be doing the past 20 years. I'm not going to do the past 30 years, we're just going into it. So this one showed Monster.com, which is a job hunting site. It still exists today. It's actually an app. I have used it a bunch in the past. I know people who are currently using the app. So it's just super cool and super handy and very sleek. I'll probably end up talking about it on the GSMC Technology Podcast. So if you're interested in tech things like this, go check it out over there. But this ad that premiered in 1999 showed kids talking about what they want their future job to be. But instead of the normal things we like hearing from kids, the soft and mushy stuff, the I want to be an astronaut, I want to be a police officer, you heard things like I want to be a yes man, I want to work my way up to middle management, I want to work hard and be underappreciated. Basically all of those stereotypes that I think we all end up feeling on a day-to-day basis about our job. Not me, though, because I absolutely love my job as the host of the GSMC Marketing Podcast host and the technology host. But I've definitely been in situations where I haven't loved my job and I felt this way. So Monster.com was just sort of showing, if you wouldn't want it for your kids, if you don't want your kids to grow up and feel that way, why is it okay that you feel that way? Why is it okay that you are doing this to yourself? What happened to the little kid inside of you that used to say he wanted to be an astronaut, that wanted to be a doctor, that wanted to be a police officer? Find that kid again. Use Monster.com. Now, here's the thing. This ad didn't say any of the stuff I just said. There was no text that said it. There was nobody saying it out loud. There was no voiceover, nothing like that. But it was the genuine feeling you got from the ad that you were like, I'm not supposed to be doing this. I'm not supposed to be living this life if I am. So I definitely think it was a creative way to sort of showcase what they're going for, but not rub it in people's faces, not push people too hard, and again, to genuinely tell a story and to provoke a feeling of emotion that is so important when it comes to marketing, that we're always provoking emotions, especially ones that will carry on with people after they've seen the commercial, because I'm not going to lie, this ad stuck with me a while. I kept researching the other ads because, again, it's only number 7 and we're counting down 20 of them. But it stuck with me, and even as I'm recording the podcast now, I can hear those kids' voices in my head, and I'm thinking about things more deeply, about just life, and it stays with you. It really does, and that's so important when it comes to a piece of marketing. You want it to stick with people. So I give the ad 5 out of 5 stars because the ability to have something resonate with someone emotionally is so important in marketing. Number 8, McDonald's, The Showdown. So this showed 2 men playing basketball. Forgive me if one of them is a famous basketball player. I don't know. I was not born in 1993, and I was researching this commercial, and it just said 2 basketball players. But basically, this was a commercial, and this was one of the ones, I talked about it a little bit earlier in the podcast, but I pointed out that some of the commercials, when we look back later in the years, they're going to be a lot longer. And this was one of them, because in fact, it wasn't just one brief commercial. It was one commercial that lasted over different periods of the game. It was a story that was continuously told rather than just one story told in under a minute. And so basically it was the idea that one basketball player shows up with his Big Mac and the other one challenges him to a game of basketball where whoever loses gets to watch the other person eat the McDonald's. Now, my number one problem with this is if I bought the McDonald's, I'm not playing you for it. I bought it. I'm going to get it. Will I accept a challenge if somebody tries to challenge me with a basketball McDonald's fight-off? Absolutely. I probably won't win, but I'll accept the challenge. I don't have any money resting on this. But if I bought the McDonald's, I'm absolutely going to say no to that challenge. I bought this. I was hungry. I didn't buy this for you. So that's my only problem with the McDonald's Showdown commercial. And other than that, I give it 5 out of 5 stars because what a really cool thing that they got to tell the story over a period of various commercials rather than just one long one. Number 9, Pepsi's Cindy Crawford ad from 1992. So again, guys, like I said, we're reaching into that vault. We're pulling these out. Some of them are older, and this is one of them. This one was so old, though, if you go back and watch the commercial, you're not going to believe that the point of this commercial was to showcase Pepsi's newest can. And if you go back and look, you're going to go, that's a really old Pepsi can. But it was the newest version at the time, so they wanted to find a clever way to promote that. And they did. So this ad featured a very simple Cindy Crawford, not that she's simple, but the ad it was simple, pulling up to a gas station, buying a Pepsi, and then drinking it as 2 young men stared at her. But you find out at the end that they were actually staring at the new Pepsi can and how beautiful it looks. So just super funny, super easy, and very simple, and a great way to tell a story. I definitely think this ad was super fun, and I give it 4 out of 5 stars. Number 5, Where's the Beef? Wendy's commercial from 1984. So I had to include this one on the list. And of course, it's so high on the list that it's number 10. This is our halfway point here, guys, and I think it's pretty obvious why. This ad has inspired other ads and pop culture references and t-shirts and just so many things. And I actually didn't even know that this was where it started. So it was super interesting to see it premiere in 1984. I'm sure it would have been cool to see it premiere in 1984. But it was super cool to get to go back and watch the ad of these 2 to 3 older ladies looking at a hamburger that had very little beef but a lot of bun. And they're all like, where's the beef? And that's it. That's the whole ad. The whole ad is just them saying, where's the beef? And then a voiceover says, with Wendy's, you never have to question where the beef is because we give you a big size patty for your big size bun. Something like that. I don't think it sounds as unclean and uncut as what I just said, but it's a slogan like that. So just trust me on that one. Go look it up for yourself. I definitely love this ad, and I think it's super cool how it has inspired so many other ads. So I give it 5 out of 5 stars. Okay, everyone, we're going to go ahead and take another break from the podcast, but when we come back, we will be talking about the other top 10 of our top 20 list of the best commercials ever seen at the Super Bowl. So stay tuned because you are listening to the GSMC Marketing Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mackenzie Jaquesh, and I'll be right back.
Are you looking for a podcast that gives you all of the latest news from the world of finance? Then check out the GSMC Financial News Podcast. We'll delve into the ups and downs of the stock market, changes in the economy, and news from the world of real estate and technology. From breaking news on the New York Stock Exchange, NASDAQ, or the overseas market, to updates on the bond market, if there's money to be made, we'll cover it on the GSMC Financial News Podcast.
Hello and welcome back to the GSMC Marketing Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mackenzie Jaquesh, and thank you so much for joining me on today's episode. We've been having a lot of fun counting down the top 20 Super Bowl commercials of all time. This year is a really exciting year because a lot of these commercials will be turning 10 years old, which means there are rumors that we'll be getting to see a new iteration of them at this year's Super Bowl. So I'm going to be doing another podcast episode after the Super Bowl where we talk about all the new ads that we're seeing. But for right now, we've counted down the top 10. Just to give you a quick overview, we have talked about Bud Light and HBO's Joust, Tide's It's a Tide ad, Amazon's Alexa Loses Her Voice, Always Like a Girl, Volkswagen The Force, Snickers Betty White, Monsters.com Kids, McDonald's The Showdown, Pepsi's Sidney Crawford, and Wendy's Where's the Beef. So all very famous ads ranging from like 1984 to 2019. So we definitely covered a lot of bases, but we're only halfway there. We still have 10 more to go. So strap in because we are going to be talking about ads from even farther than the Wendy's Where the Beef commercial. So stay tuned, buckle in, let's get into it. Number 11, Coca-Cola Mean Joe Green. In 1980, this ad became so popular that it sparked a TV movie about the ad. What? That's crazy. So just to give you a rundown for those of you that were not born in 1980 or have no idea what this commercial is, because I also had to go look it up, but it turns out this commercial shows a football player after the big game, limping away. He's clearly weak. He's clearly tired. And a little boy offers him his Coca-Cola. It totally changes the guy's attitude, and he ends up giving him his jersey. And it's just a very nice and tender moment that was all told under a minute, very short commercial to tell this entire story and then later to inspire a movie about it. Like, that's crazy. But I think it's the reason it inspired a movie is because it's such a tender moment and it's such a touching moment and it's something we can all relate to, of getting to meet our idols and getting to help them out in some way or share a Coke with them would just be such a big moment for anyone in their lives that I think we all felt a little happy for the boy at the end when he got the jersey and a little excited for him as well. Number 12, Budweiser Singing Frogs. So this one came out in 1995, which makes it like 24 years old. And I know this because I was born in 1996 and I can do math. But more importantly, this just shows you how far the brand of Budweiser has come because this ad is very different from anything they would do nowadays, but I still think it showcases the brand in a very fun way. It is basically just a bunch of frogs ribbiting, but eventually it sounds like Budweiser rather than them just going Bud, Bud, Bud. It's just funny and it's very cute. I rate this ad a 3 out of 5 because it's fun and it's great and it showcases the brand, but it doesn't tell a story. And guys, we're looking for stories, right? So it does make the top 20 list. It is a really great ad. It does showcase the brand, but it's definitely not the most amazing ad on this list. Number 13 is Pepsi OK with Steve Carell and Lil Wayne. And I believe, who's the girl rapper in that? Cardi B. And Cardi B. So again, Cardi B showing up in an ad. She showed up in Amazon Alexa losing her voice as well. So one, Cardi B is just like, is she in every Super Bowl commercial? I know I only named 2, but I feel like that's a lot for just one celebrity. But this promotes the idea of when a waiter asks you, is Pepsi okay? You shouldn't just respond by saying, sure, fine. Look at all these other ways you can say it. Cardi B comes in and she does her rolling of the R. Lil Wayne goes, okay, or whatever he does. I'm not going to do the impression, but you know what I'm getting at. And Steve Carell talks about how Pepsi is more than okay. And this ad gets a 5 out of 5 stars. I would give it more stars if I could, because I really like the fact that the marketing team was like, why is Pepsi okay? I always get asked this. If I ask for a drink, the waiter always asks, is Pepsi okay? That's never going to stop, but let's try to change that narrative. And being able to change the narrative is a very powerful thing and a very interesting thing. So definitely something to pay attention to of how they did it with this ad. Michael Bublé, or should I say Michael Bublé, 2019's ad. So this shows Michael Bublé at a common grocery store buying a bubbly sparkling water, but he doesn't call it bubbly, he calls it Bublé. He then goes on pronouncing other things wrong throughout the whole commercial, and at the very end, you see him changing the Bublé to bubbly, or you see him changing the bubbly to Bublé, and the store clerk is like, Michael, don't do that. And it's just a funny moment, and it's such a precious moment, I want to call it, even though I know it seems like a weird word to put on this, but Michael Bublé is just such a precious person that whenever we get to see him act a little immature like this, it makes us all go, aw, that's just Michael. That's just Michael being adorable. And I think bubbly water knew that and that he had that quality, because who doesn't know that he has that quality? And they really got to showcase it in this ad and have a little bit of fun with it. Number 15, Nike Air Jordan. So this showed 2 of the best basketball players in the world, guys, Michael Jordan and Bugs Bunny playing basketball. And obviously Bugs Bunny pulls out a bunch of funny animated tricks. He dresses up as a woman at one point to distract the basketball team. They throw pies in people's faces. They have an anvil at one point weighing down the basketball players. There's just a bunch of animated shenanigans going on. But the funniest part of the whole thing is that it's called Hair Jordans, H-A-R-E, rather than Air Jordans. So funny wordplay using a rabbit, obviously, and just the whole making light of Air Jordans. And I thought it was a really fun way to sort of, one, pull on the nostalgia heartstrings for me, although I recognize that may have not been the case in 1992, but it did pull on nostalgia heartstrings for me while showcasing the brand in a very fun and very light way that Nike no longer does. Okay, everyone, we're going to go ahead and take a short break from the podcast, but when we come back, we're going to talk about the final top 5 of the best Super Bowl commercials ever. So stay tuned for that, because you are listening to the GSMC Marketing Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mackenzie Jaquish, and I'll be right back.
The Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast, the show that gives you advice on everything travel. We explore places you've always wanted to go, as well as giving tips for traveling in those places. We'll give you advice on the best sites for travel tips, information, and discounts. Join us as we travel the world, explore cultures, and meet new people. The Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast has got you covered. Download the GSMC Travel Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
everyone, and welcome back to the GSMC Marketing Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mackenzie Jakebush, and thank you so much for sticking around on today's episode. We have had so much fun counting down the top 20 of the best Super Bowl commercials of all time. And right now we're at 15. I got 5 left to show you, and I think these are by far some of the best that we have ever seen at a Super Bowl until this year, because maybe there's going to be some that absolutely blow me away this year. So definitely stay tuned for future podcasts detailing those ads as well. And just so you can stay in the loop, make sure you are subscribed to this podcast and you follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, because we always post updates for new episodes over there. All right, let's talk about the final 5 best Super Bowl commercials of all time. Number 16, Pepsi, Britney Spears, Beyonce, and Pink, We Will Rock You in 2004. Now, this ad is weird. It just is. I don't think there's a better way to describe it other than weird, because it's Britney Spears, Beyonce, and Pink, 3 of the biggest singers in the world, legendary stars, will always be famous long after they're gone because that's just the status that they have, getting ready to fight in some sort of medieval, weird century. I don't even know what time zone it's supposed to be, but they're wearing like armor. They're about to fight each other, but instead they start singing We Will Rock You. Each of them gets a moment to sing their own ballad, and they eventually sing it so hard that the Pepsi that's been sitting on top of the kingdom falls down and they can throw out the cans to all the people that are thirsty. Very cool, very fun, really great way to use that celebrity endorsement to the full extent. We've seen a lot of ads with celebrity endorsement, but this had 3 of the biggest singers in the world all together promoting Pepsi, which is really cool. Not only that, Enrique Iglesias was in this ad. He didn't have any lines and he didn't sing, but he was in it. I don't know why, but it made the ad a lot better. So maybe that's just why. Maybe the marketing team just knew that he would make the ad better. And he did. It worked. It worked great, guys. I think it worked really well. So this ad gets 4 out of 5 stars because it tells a story. It really pushes the boundaries of a normal ad, and it still promotes the product, Pepsi. It kept the brand. It kept being consistent with the brand, which is really, really important. 17. Number 17. The Old Spice, The Man Your Man Could Smell Like, 2010. So this is another ad that we have seen a lot of over the past 10 years and is having its decade-old birthday at this Super Bowl. So I'll be interested to see if they do another version of it. But we all know what you're talking about. We see the Old Spice mascot, that very, very good-looking man, and he says, your man could smell like a man riding on a horse. Your man could smell like a man doing this. And he's always doing very cool, heroic things. And what I really like about this commercial, and the reason I'm going to give it 5 out of 5 stars, is because it did something that not a lot of commercials do that they should. Although their product isn't targeted to women who would find this man appealing, obviously women aren't buying Old Spice for themselves, but the women are the ones who will think this man is attractive enough to go out and buy the product. But they're also the ones that are buying it for their husbands and for their boyfriends. So I just find it very interesting that they noticed that although men are their target demographic, they are not the ones that are buying the product. So definitely trying to target to the people who are actually purchasing the product, who are actually going to the store to pick it up, which is what I think they achieved with the Old Spice Your Man Could Smell Like This Man ad in 2010. Number 18, Clash of Clans featuring Liam Neeson, 2015. So Clash of Clans is a very popular video game that has used a lot of celebrity endorsement over the past couple of years. But when I saw the Liam Neeson ad in 2015, it absolutely blew me away with just how funny it was and how genuinely entertaining it was, because it sort of makes fun of Liam Neeson, but in a very light and very fun way that I don't think we get to see a lot, and we definitely don't get to see that side of him a lot. But it shows that he is that intense man that we see in all of his action movies. He is that way even when he's just playing a video game. Even when he's just getting his coffee and they say his name wrong, he is that intense all the time, and that's what makes it so incredibly funny. And that's what makes the commercial so incredibly funny and so engaging. And it does the thing that we've talked about that's so important with the Super Bowl commercials, is that you're going to want to watch that even after the Super Bowl, and you're going to want to share that even after the Super Bowl. So it'll live long after the game is over on the internet. Number 4, Up for Whatever, Budweiser. In 2014. So this was an ad very similar to the Showdown ad, but a little bit more recent, where it wasn't just one commercial that lasted 30 seconds. It was several commercials that lasted 30 seconds and the entirety of the game. So basically it showed a guy going on a date, and the girl says, if you accept this Budweiser, will you accept whatever happens after that? And he says yes, and then she ends up taking him on a crazy adventure that was all planned. Everybody knew except him. And the sort of catch of it all is that this guy is in a Super Bowl commercial and has no idea that he's in a Super Bowl commercial. So like Don Cheadle is on an elevator with him while he's feeding an alpaca. He meets twin girls of the first girl that he met, and they're in a limo together on their way to a bachelorette party. And just sort of adventures happen, super fun and super creative to show the brand in that way and to show it as being a fun experience that you felt like you got to go on with the guy in the commercial. Number 20, I'd like to buy the world of Coke, Coca-Cola, 1971. Of course, this ad had to make our list, and of course, this ad also had to be number 20 on our list because it's the most famous ad in the entire world. It is what launched Coca-Cola into being known for all of its amazing ads. It's just a huge ad, and it's really a great example of the level of marketing that you can achieve that not a lot of people push for, but that maybe they should. And I just think it's super cool and super great to get to look back on ads like this. So definitely go check it out if you haven't. It obviously gets 5 out of 5 stars. It's number 20 on the list. Okay, everyone, that is it for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed the countdown of the top 20 Super Bowl commercials of all time. I can't wait for the Super Bowl because I will be recording an episode right after where we talk about all of the ads that were shown at this year's Super Bowl, so definitely stay tuned for that. Thank you for listening to the GSMC Marketing Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mackenzie Jaquush, and I'll see you next time.
You've been listening to the GSMC Marketing News Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcasts on SoundCloud, Stitcher, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to any podcast app and you'll find all of the shows from the GSMC Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, from business news to weird news, you'll find it all on the GSMC Podcast Network. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.